Have you ever felt like you're playing an invisible chess game where every move you make is somehow turned against you? Like no matter how much truth you hold, you're always the one to blame. If you've been manipulated by a narcissist, then this is the video you can't afford to miss. In a narcissist's world, everything is black or white. You're either their fan or their enemy. And the moment you step back, go silent, or stop reacting, you instantly become their next target for destruction. But what they never expect is when you don't fight back with emotion, you fight back with strategy. And that's when their illusion of power starts to crumble. In today's video, you're going to discover 8 sharp, powerful, and psychologically strategic methods to expose a narcissist's manipulative behavior without breaking the law, without screaming, and without shedding a single tear. You'll dive deep into their psyche, uncover how they operate, and most importantly, you'll learn how to take back the control you rightfully deserve. This isn't just about exposing them, it's about no longer being their prey. So if you've ever felt deceived, gaslit, or driven to the edge, watch this video until the end. And if you're ready to reclaim your peace and your power, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and join us as we dismantle manipulation, not with rage, but with strategy. Strategy 1. Strategic silence. When silence is louder than words. One of the most common mistakes people make when dealing with a narcissist is this. They try to explain, try to reason, or even try to make the narcissist understand. But here's the harsh truth. You can't reason with someone whose entire sense of reality is built on twisting facts to protect a fragile ego. That's exactly why strategic silence is one of the most powerful psychological weapons you can use to expose narcissistic manipulation. Not with words, but with your energy. Let me be clear, this silence is not weakness. It's not avoidance. It's not surrender. It's a deliberate shutdown of supply. You are no longer providing what they survive on, your emotional reaction. When you go silent, you're sending a message the narcissist hears loud and clear. You're not playing their game anymore. Remember, for a narcissist, every reaction you give, whether it's anger, tears, or an argument, is fuel. It's narcissistic supply. It feeds their illusion of control and significance. But when you stop reacting, you are cutting off the one thing that keeps their power alive. At first, they'll go into panic mode. They'll do anything to provoke you, send provocative texts, spread rumors, remind you of emotional memories, or play the victim. They'll do whatever it takes to pull you back into the game. But you don't respond. You see them, but you don't touch them. You hear them, but you don't answer. And when they can no longer manipulate you emotionally, they start to unravel. Not because they miss you, not because they feel guilty, but because they're losing control. You see, to a manipulator, silence isn't just rejection. It's erasure. It's as if you walked off the stage of their theater and left them delivering monologues to an empty room. And for someone whose identity depends on attention, that's a nightmare. Strategic silence is also the space where you reclaim your inner energy. No more spinning in circles trying to explain, justify, or apologize for things you didn't do. You begin to hear your own voice again. You start defining boundaries, and from that quiet space, you begin to heal. If you're going through a chaotic breakup with a narcissist, try using the non-responsive tactic, the grey rock method, or ideally, no contact. No need to explain, no warning, just cut off the supply. You don't win by arguing. You win by protecting your peace. And if they say you're silent because you're weak, let them. Smile, because weakness has never caused a narcissist to spiral. Only calculated, empowered silence does that. Strategy 2. Reflecting the manipulation through calm detachment. When you become the mirror that exposes them. Narcissists are masters of distortion. They manipulate through subtle tactics. Gaslighting, DAVO, deny, attack, reverse victim and offender, and playing the perfect victim. But what they never expect is when you don't fall into their emotional traps, but instead reflect them. Reflection is not mimicry. It's the art of responding without reacting. You gently, clearly, and calmly show them their own behavior, giving them nowhere to hide. For example, when they try to blame you for something that is clearly their fault, instead of arguing, you simply say, "I see you're trying to make me responsible for something you just did. I don't accept that." Or when they pretend to be the victim while you're the one actually hurting, you calmly respond, "I see you're switching roles between the one who harms and the one who's harmed. I won't engage in that game." By doing this, you're holding up a mirror, forcing them to face the truth of their own actions. And for someone who lives in illusion, that is deeply uncomfortable. Remember, they can't manipulate you if you're not playing by their emotional rules. They need you to react. They need you to get angry, to cry, or at the very least to feel guilty. But when you stay calm, clear, and emotionally neutral, you strip away their grip on the moment. The reflection isn't just about recognizing manipulation, it's about disarming it. You can also reflect by identifying and naming repeated behavior patterns. For example, I notice that every time I set a boundary, you redirect the conversation and make me feel like I'm the problem. That's a familiar pattern, and I won't continue engaging with it. That statement isn't rude. It isn't an accusation, but it's powerful. It exposes the manipulation without pulling you into the emotional fire. From a psychological standpoint, this strategy works because it disrupts their narrative control. They can't play the victim if you won't play the villain. They can't manipulate the frame if you stay in the observer's seat. And when they're reflected long enough, their twisted logic and behavior start to unravel in plain sight. This is also a crucial step in reclaiming your mental authority, because when you calmly call out the truth, you're reclaiming the voice they tried to silence. And the best part? You don't need to yell. You don't need to insult. You don't need to become like them. You only need to become a conscious mirror, clear enough for them to see themselves and strong enough not to break. Strategy 3. Remember, don't romanticize when you refuse to forget the truth that saved you. One of the most insidious tactics a narcissist uses isn't screaming, threatening, or direct attacks. It's something far more subtle. They make you forget. Forget what they did, forget the way they made you question your own reality, forget the silent pain you swallowed for the sake of peace. And if you are someone who has a compassionate heart, who believes in second chances, who wants to see the good in people, then you are the perfect target for this. Because they don't need you to verbally forgive them, they just need you to start doubting your own memory. They'll say things like, "You're overreacting. It wasn't that serious. You're remembering it wrong. I never said that." And slowly you start to wonder, am I being too sensitive? Maybe I did blow it out of proportion. And that's when they're manipulating you through your memory. But this third strategy is your shield. Remember the truth. And don't romanticize the person who broke you. You don't remember to hate. You remember so you don't go back. You remember to stay clear-eyed, stronger, and to enforce firmer boundaries. You don't need to carry anger forever. But you do need to remember just enough to protect your heart from being fooled again. Forgiveness does not mean reconciliation. Forgiveness does not mean you're okay with repetition. You have the right to move on. But move on with your memory intact, not a version of events they rewrote. When you hold on to your truth, patterns become obvious. You begin to notice. They're at their most charming when they sense you're walking away. Their kindness only shows up when you've grown cold. Their sweet promises are often just camouflage for the same toxic cycles. And you realize that wasn't love, that was control. This memory strategy is also the foundation for rebuilding your identity. When you remember how deeply you were manipulated, you learn to detect the early signs in the future. When you remember how drained you once felt, you cherish your peace now. And when you remember how much you gave, how much you hoped, how hard you tried, you finally see. Your exit wasn't a failure, it was your survival. So tell yourself every day, I don't have to hate, but I don't have to forget. I have the right to carry my truth because it protects me. Strategy 4. Flip the game by asking the right questions. When you don't answer, you reflect. One of the most subtle and effective ways to disarm manipulation is this: don't respond with statements. Respond with questions. While a narcissist tries to dominate the conversation through bold accusations, blame-shifting, and twisted narratives, you can reclaim control with a single well-placed question. A question forces them to pause, to reflect, and sometimes to expose the irrationality of their own words. For example, when they throw out a vague blame tactic like, "You always mess everything up." You don't need to argue or apologize. Ask, "Can you be specific? Could you give me a concrete example of when that happened?" Or when they say something like, "You always make things worse," you respond with, "Why do you think that happens, and what have you done to help improve the situation?" These questions carry two powerful effects. They shift the focus from blame to reflection. They hold the narcissist accountable for their words. You're not attacking, you're not defending, you're calmly handing them their own narrative and letting it unravel in their hands. When you ask questions, you're no longer on the defensive. You're guiding the conversation, something narcissists despise, because they rely on control to dominate the storyline. Another powerful moment to use this strategy is when they pretend not to understand your boundaries or twist your words. You can ask, "Do you believe ignoring someone's boundaries is part of a healthy relationship?" Underheaded or perhaps depressed, "Do you think making me feel guilty is a solution to this problem?" These aren't gotcha questions, they're truth triggers. And the key? Stay calm. Don't ask with sarcasm, don't raise your voice. You're not baiting them, you're clearing the fog. You don't need them to admit the truth, you just need them to hear it echo, unanswered. That's the power of this strategy. You stop getting pulled into emotional quicksand. You're no longer the one defending, explaining, or justifying. You become the one who inquires, who observes, and who holds space for clarity. Psychologically, manipulators hate reflection. They can't stand being under the microscope, especially when the person looking back isn't flustered. Questions destabilize them because questions demand clarity, and clarity is what they fear the most. Remember this: you don't have to respond to every accusation. Sometimes the most powerful move is to ask a question they can't answer. Strategy 5. Protect the truth with documentation. When you don't argue, you hold receipt. In a relationship with a narcissist, words are constantly twisted, truth is flipped upside down, and you're often blamed for things you never did. Every conversation becomes a battlefield, not of emotion, but of who remembers it right. And the most painful part, you might have been right all along, but without evidence, you were defenseless. Meanwhile, they, with their masterful manipulations, made you doubt your own memory. That's why strategy 5 is vital. Document everything, write it down, save it, and when necessary, use the truth to protect yourself. This doesn't mean living in fear or becoming paranoid. It means you've learned your lesson. You no longer let emotion blur the fact. Save text messages, emails, voice notes, agreements, behaviors, especially when it involves promises, boundaries, or responsibilities. For instance, if they agree to something via message, don't delete it. If they apologize verbally, jot it down in a journal. If they insult or threaten you, keep the evidence. You don't need to prove yourself to them. You document everything to protect yourself from future gaslighting, and in many cases, that documentation can become your shield in legal situations like divorce, custody battles, or property disputes. Narcissists are masters of playing the perfect victim in court, and if all you have is your memory, they'll destroy you with their fake narrative. But when you have clear records, they panic. They realize you're no longer easy to manipulate, that every word, every action, every lie they told might now be held up to the light. And most importantly, documentation doesn't just protect you from them, it protects your sanity. It reminds you that you weren't crazy, you weren't exaggerating, you weren't too sensitive. You were someone who saw the truth and had the courage to remember it clearly. because there may come a moment when they return with a perfect love bomb, when they promise they've changed, when you start questioning if maybe you were too harsh. That's when you need your records the most. Keep a journal, screenshot conversations, log timelines, preserve what you once dismissed, because you thought love doesn't need evidence. But with a manipulator, evidence is survival. And remember, your records don't need to be shown to anyone to have power. They just need to be believed by you. Strategy 6. Refuse to play the role in their drama. When you don't take the script, they can't perform. Every narcissist is an unappointed director. They carry around a mental script where you play the villain, the weak one, or the one who's never enough. In their story, you're always the one to blame, the one who reacts emotionally, the one who eventually begs for forgiveness, even when you did nothing wrong. And them? They're the misunderstood victim. Or worse, the so-called hero enduring your supposed dysfunction. But here's the twist. They need you to keep the drama alive. So what happens when you stop playing your part? When you don't argue, don't explain, and stop playing by their emotional rules? You collapse the entire psychological structure they depend on. You pull the curtain on their stage. You leave them standing in silence, with no one to perform to. That's why silence, disengagement, and refusing to participate are some of the most powerful responses you can give, not because you're punishing them, but because you've realized that every reaction is fuel to their performance. Think back to the times you exploded in pain trying to defend yourself. You wept, you pleaded, you tried to make them understand, and in those moments, they felt powerful, because you were playing the exact role they cast you in. But then, one day, you stop. You don't send long texts. You don't rush to explain. You don't try to reason with someone who's never actually listening. And right then, the entire show collapses. Narcissists don't know what to do with someone who won't react, because in their twisted logic, your emotional response is proof that they're right. They'll throw emotional bait, guilt, blame, even fake affection, just to see if you'll step back on stage. But when your silence isn't weakness, when it's liberation, they begin to panic. Here's the truth. You can't control them, but you can refuse to co-star in a performance you never agreed to be in. You can say, I'm no longer participating in this kind of conversation. I don't agree with this narrative, and I don't owe you an explanation. My silence isn't compliance. It's clarity. When you hold your ground, when you stay out of the emotional traps, you're taking back control of yourself. And for a narcissist, that's the one loss they can't handle. Don't let them write another chapter using your pain. When you walk off their stage, no tantrum, no applause, you're ending the play for good. Strategy 7. Cut off the supply. When you stop feeding their emotional hunger, they begin to collapse. Every narcissist thrives off one thing, your emotional response. Whether it's praise, admiration, anger, or even pain, it all becomes fuel for their inflated and bottomless ego. They don't care if it's positive or negative. As long as you're reacting, they still have power over you. That's why cutting off the supply is one of the most devastating moves you can make against a narcissist. Because when you stop reacting, stop explaining, stop giving away your emotional energy, you don't just deprive them of their favorite fuel, you force them to confront their deepest fear, emotional invisibility. To a narcissist, silence isn't just absence, it's annihilation. It says, you're no longer important enough for me to engage with, and that's what triggers their internal collapse. At first, they'll scramble to wake you up using their classic tactics, sending cryptic or concerned messages, playing the victim or guilt-tripping, creating drama just to get your attention, using third parties, aka flying monkeys, to re-engage you. All of it designed with one goal, to spark an emotional reaction from you. But when you remain grounded, still, silent and immune to their chaos, they begin to truly lose control. They may lash out in explosive rage, intensify their smear campaigns against you, or rapidly seek out a replacement supply. But don't be fooled. A narcissist can replace the source, but they can't replicate the impact, especially if you were someone who once made them feel admired, seen, or challenged their control. They don't miss you out of love. They miss you because you were once the mirror that reflected their power. When that mirror disappears, they don't know who they are anymore. And that's when you win without fighting. Cutting off the supply isn't about revenge. It's about radical self-protection. Declaring, I will no longer be the fuel for your manipulation. You withdraw not out of coldness, but out of awakening. You've realized your emotions are precious, and they no longer belong in the hands of someone who weaponizes them. When you're no longer their supply, you become their liberation and your own. Strategy 8. Redefine yourself. When you stop trying to fix them and start healing you, there comes a powerful moment in your recovery from a narcissist. It's the moment you stop asking questions about them and start asking questions about yourself. The self-blaming ones like, why did I let this happen? But the deeper, freeing kind, who am I? When I'm no longer trapped in the role they cast for me. In a manipulative relationship, you shrunk yourself to fit their frame. You silenced your voice, erased your boundaries, abandoned your needs and dreams just to keep the peace. You tried to fix them, rescue them, understand them, heal them. But none of it was ever enough. Because you were trying to heal someone who never wanted to change, while losing the one person who was desperately crying to be seen, yourself. And one day, you stop. You stop trying to heal someone who refuses healing, and instead you turn inward. You reopen the journal you once buried. You make time for the things that make your soul feel alive. You begin to love yourself, not through someone else's approval, but through your own rediscovery. And something magical happens. You start to redefine yourself. You're no longer too sensitive, no longer too much, no longer the burden someone had to put up with. You become emotionally rich and worthy of being heard, a person with healthy, sacred boundaries, a soul with intrinsic value, whether they acknowledge it or not. You no longer live to be understood. You live to understand yourself. You no longer seek permission, you give it to yourself. The narcissist can't stand that because they haven't just lost a supply, they've lost the power to rewrite your identity. When you rise and write a new story for yourself, when you reclaim your sense of self without their script, when you stop chasing crumbs of validation to prove your worth, that's when you've truly broken free. Here's the truth. Your healing isn't about proving anything to them. Your growth, your strength, your success, they're not for showing them what they lost. They're for becoming who you were always meant to be before love distorted you into someone small. You don't need an apology to move forward. You don't need closure to be reborn. All you need is yourself, honest, grounded, whole. And when you walk forward with that unapologetic sense of self, when you no longer crave their validation, when you no longer bend or shrink or second guess, the narcissist will watch from a distance, not with regret, but with powerlessness, because you've become the one thing they could never control. A free soul. You don't need to scream to prove you were hurt. You don't need to win an argument to be seen. And you certainly don't need to fix someone else in order to feel worthy. Because, here's the truth, the greatest victory after leaving a toxic relationship isn't about teaching them a lesson. It's about choosing yourself. Every strategy you've just learned, from exposing manipulation, refusing to play their game, cutting off the supply, to redefining your identity, isn't about control. They are deliberate steps toward a stronger, clearer, and freer version of you. You're no longer the person who reacts. You're the one who chooses when and if to respond. You're no longer a supporting character in their twisted story. You're the main character in your own. Your silence isn't surrender. It's a declaration. I no longer allow others to define my worth. And that's what a narcissist can't stand. Not your anger, but your calm. Not your words, but your lack of need to explain. This path isn't easy. There will be nights when you wonder if you're being too harsh. There will be moments when the good memories resurface and you question your decision, but lesser forget. You didn't walk away because you hated them. You walked away because you finally chose to love yourself more. If you're still watching this, I know one thing. You're no longer the person they once controlled. You're in the process of rebirth, not from the ashes of pain, but from the untouchable strength that was always within you. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone who needs this wake-up call. Because when you rise, you're not just healing yourself, you're inspiring countless others to step out of the shadows too. And you know what? You don't need applause, because the freedom you're living now is the loudest proof of your victory.